Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SAS Via Release Highlight Show. I'm Tiago de Souza, and today we'll be talking about what's new in SAS Via as of August 2023. To start, we're bringing back the Into the SAS Viaverse segment we debuted last month. David Weik will provide an overview of all of the updates and features from this month's release you won't want to miss. Then, for our Release Talk segment, we will interview Joe Katz about Distributed Open Source Node. This distributed open source node offers a simple way to integrate Python and R algorithms into your forecasting process and distributes the code, offering a way for you to scale your open source algorithms by using SAS Via. But before we get into all that, it's time to dive back into the SAS Viaverse. David, take it away.
This time taking a look at what's new with SAS Via 2023.07. We have updates in SAS Studio, Visual Analytics and Intelligent Decisioning, and of course much more. So let's get right into it. Here we are inside of SAS Visual Analytics, where we will take a look at the new auto-tuning results when working with auto-tuning on some of these statistics and machine learning objects. So here I already have opened up and minimized all other objects of Visual Analytics and only have left open the statistics and the machine learning algorithms. Let's pull in a decision tree. We will have to assign our data, so assign our response variable. I'm using the HMEQ dataset, so that is our response. And we will be selecting all other variables as predictors. Take a look at our first iteration on the decision tree, and then we will activate the auto-tuning, where in the setup you can specify different search methods, object metrics, hyperparameters to tune it to your liking. I will switch the object metric to KS, click OK. Then wait for the auto-tuning to finish up. And now the question is, of course, okay, but what did the auto-tuning actually do? You can now either right-click on your decision tree and select a few auto-tune results from the context menu, or you can go to the snowman menu of the whole object and select few auto-tune results from there. This opens up a pop-up where you can now view all the details of all the different evaluations and iterations and how your model was tuned over time, and also see a nice little graphical representation of that result. This is of course not only available for statistical models like decision trees, but also for machine learning algorithms. Here I have a gradient boosting, and you also have an auto-tune activated here. And then again, we can use the snowman icon to open up the auto-tuning results. Here, of course, all the metrics look a bit different just because of the different algorithms that were used. And also here you can view the nice looking objective history. This will help you to better evaluate how the auto-tuning went and can help you guide when you take it from Visual Analytics into Model Studio, for example. Let's move on and go to Intelligent Decisioning. Here we will take a look at what has been added to the deployments page. So let's switch to there. You can see in my environment, I currently have 3 decisions that have been published, 2 to CAS, 1 to the Microanalytics Service or MAS. And also on the right-hand side, you can see I have 2 decisions that include a model and 1 decision that doesn't. So let's first select one of these model decisions that has been published to CAS, and we will generate a report for this. When this download has been finished, we can open up the created PDF, and it summarizes all of the objects that are inside of the decision and how you can directly talk to them, and who last modified it, when it was modified, all of these juicy details that will help you write your documentation and keep track of changes over time. you also see that the in and outputs of your decisions are included alongside their description. We can take a look at a different destination because, of course, MAS and CAS generate different decision types. So let's take a look. And the main difference here being that you now get a module URI that you can call as a REST call, for example. So you also get this type of documentation that you could hand over to your application developers to more easily communicate with them and also enhance their documentation processes. This is a great addition to enhance the governance abilities of SAS Viya. Let's close these two PDFs and let's move on to SAS Studio, where we have two new exciting steps to take a look at. First off, in the transform data category, we have a new step made available called masked data. This will help you to anonymize or obfuscate your data within your datasets, and to showcase the capabilities of it, I will be making use of the SAS DQ reference data that is available. And alongside all the, of course, specifications, you also find this contexts table in here that contains some sample data that you can use to try out this step and all the other functionalities around masking and obfuscating data. So now that we have connected our data, we can take a look at our masked data step. Let's make it big. And first up, you can either use the global locale for the QKB, or you can select a specific one. So for me, for example, I would switch to the German one if I were working with German data. Next up, we have the note that you can, with this step in one runtime, can obfuscate up to 10 columns. We will only be making use of one of them right now. Let's take a look. You have the option to mask your data. You can hash your data or substitute it through your own lookup table logic that you can put in here. We will use the masking feature. Then, of course, you can mask all characters, or you can make use of all the great functionality that the QKB brings with it to only do partial masking of your data. If you, for example, would like only the email domain to be masked, but keep the rest of the email address still valid or readable. Let's select the column we want to be masked. We will be selecting the address here. And now, first up, you see an additional data obfuscation has opened up. We will minimize this to save on screen real estate. And we will go back to our address column. We have the output options where we can either specify it to replace the column in place, so overwrite our obfuscated values on top of the real values, or put them into a new column. You can specify your own suffix for this, or you can make use of the default, which is underscore masked, which I will keep for now. And now let's make this small again. Let's just run this node and take a look at the generated output. We will click on preview data. And in the preview data, we can again make use of the snowman icon, use the column selection feature, and we will only select the address and the address masked columns. And here you can see what the masking does to our data. I think this is very helpful if you are dealing with sensitive data or data that needs some additional cleaning steps. Masked data is the step for you to help you with obfuscation of your data. Let's clean up our slate in the flow. And let's go back to the steps menu. And a new category has been added, Manage Models. And we have one new step, Register SAS Model. Let's drag this into our flow. And here we can now specify new models that we want to add to SAS Model Manager to be registered and versioned there. So we will first go ahead, as we will be connecting an analytical store model or an A-store model. And we will also provide the scored data for easier lift and fit statistics that are generated for us. We can give this model a name. We will call it HMEQ update. You can add an optional description. You will have to select your model type. We will select the analytical store. You have to specify a model manager project where we will say also MHQ update. You can specify the model repository in which you want this to be added. I will leave it at the public one. If your project already exists and you are updating an existing model, then it can make sense to also create a whole new project version, especially if you expect your data to change over time. You can also specify in the data tab that you want to bring in scored data. And now we will connect data to this. For this, I just trained a small gradient boosting model in with SAS code and have saved the A-store file to a CAS table and also the scored data to a CAS table. And now we can connect it to the input ports of our step. And when we go back, we can now select the target variable. Again, we select bad. The event target level is 1. The posterior probability is our p-bad1. We will leave the training and test partition at their default values. And then to also generate lift, rock, and fit statistics, we will leave those at the default. And for the fit statistic, we will now select the non-event probability, which is p-bad0 and 0. And now if we run this, this will register our model alongside with the scored data for the fit, rock, and lift analysis to Model Manager. Let's take a look how this will look like. And here we have our HMEQ update with the score code generated for you, the specified variables that are needed as an input and output, and how can you tell that this was generated through the step. If we take a look at the right-hand side, we see development tool. Here you can see SAS Studio, which is the indication where this model came from. Let's take a look at what new custom steps have been released since the last update video. We have the first new step is CAS validate unique IDs. This custom step allows you to quickly check are all IDs unique within your ID column. This is very important for text analytics and pairs nicely with the CAS generate unique ID custom step that we previously discussed. So I hope this helps you out in your projects. The second custom step that was released is DuckDB, which basically is a wrapper around your connection and communication with a DuckDB, Duck database, to run, execute, and manage SQL statements and their in and output for you. It's a great step if you are already using DuckDB. See you next month.
That was David Weik back with our Into the SAS Viyaverse segment. What did you think of it? Let me know in the comments. While you're doing all that, check out my interview with Joe Katz to learn about the distributed open source node. Hello, Joe. Welcome to the show. Could you start off by telling us a little bit about what you do at SAS?
Sure. Thanks, Thiago. It's great to be here with you. I'm the product manager for our core forecasting project, Product Visual Forecasting. I have the pleasure of working with an amazing and incredible team of developers and testers. As a product manager, I get to interact with folks from all across SAS, includes my fellow product managers, tech support, project managers, sales, marketing, documentation, education, consulting, pretty much you name it, I interact with them. And I also talk directly with our customers.
A whole lot of hats you wear, a lot of different things. But
yes.
For today, you're here to talk to us about a distributed open source node feature. Could you tell me a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, the distributed open source modeling node allows users to more readily or more easily incorporate their Python and R code into a SAS visual forecasting pipeline. The node supports the univariate modeling of each time series and then distributes that processing across all of the worker nodes, just as it does with the SAS univariate methods for forecasting. So once it's in the VF flow, all of the other capabilities within VF, the model comparison node, forecast viewer, the interactive modeling node, they're all available to the users.
Gotcha. So it sounds like it just makes things easier overall, but why specifically is this so important for open source users?
That's a really good question. Scalability and performance are the main advantages. The univariate forecasting is an embarrassingly parallel problem, meaning that each time series can be processed completely independently because there's no interdependencies between time series. What this allows, the node allows the open source users to take advantage of the visual forecasting capabilities because we already shuffle the data so that each time series resides on a single thread on a worker node. So we do that automatically already for our SAS models, and that allows for more efficient parallel processing. In addition, the open source users can also compare their algorithms or methods directly against the SAS methods using the capabilities directly within visual forecasting. And that they can see which ones provide better quality forecasts.
Gotcha. So we talked about the importance of it and the value that it provides, but how exactly does it work? Could you go into detail on that? And also, how does it help someone that's using forecasting in their organization?
So I mentioned some of this above, but let's take a look at a demo.
Here we are in SAS Visual Forecasting. I've pre-staged a project and I've opened it up in Model Studio. And what you can see on the screen is the data tab. We are working with time series data here. And you see that the date variable is defined here with the roll of time. Our dependent variable is sales, so we're going to be forecasting sales. And I have two independent variables that I'm going to be using in the modeling, or potentially using in the modeling, is discount and price. And then my product line, product name, and region name are the three variables that uniquely define a time series. This table has 17 total time series that we'll be working with. Okay, let me also show you some information in project settings. So the number of forecast periods, or the forecast horizon, is 12. The number of periods I'm excluding from the model is 0. So this is if you wanted to do out-of-sampling modeling. And the statistic that I'm using for my champion model selection criteria is weighted mean absolute percent error. Okay, now we're going to go over to the Pipelines tab. And on Pipeline 1, I'm going to show you how to add a distributed open source node. You just drag it and drop it. And alternatively, you could add a child node and then select it and insert it that way. Okay, let's move over to Pipeline 2, where I have added two distributed open source code nodes, one with an exponential using open source exponential smoothing and another one using the open source profit package. Let me click on the exponential smoothing node. You'll see some options here on the right side. One is to open the code editor, which we'll do in a second. And then you get to specify the language, either Python or R. And then for model selection, you get to specify a holdout sample if you so desire. We're leaving that at the default of 0. There's output tables in here. At this point in time, there are only the standard or required output tables. In the future, we may be adding some optional tables. So let's go ahead and open the node. And in here on the left-hand side, as you see, a bunch of variables that are available to be used within the Python program to tie it into the SAS Visual Forecasting flow. On the right-hand side, when you first come into this node, before entering any code, you'll just see the first 6 lines, and then you can enter your code or copy and paste, and you see we've imported the required packages that we need. And then let me just highlight a couple things here in the code. The first one is that this VF predict array at the end of the program is required. This is the array of predicted values from fitting the models, and it covers both the historical region, the fitted values over the historical region, and the forecast in the horizon. That is the only required one, and that's needed so that it can fit into the pipeline flow and feed into the model comparison node after this. You'll see a number of other variables in here as well. You'll see VF time name. This corresponds to the name of the time ID variable. In this case, it was date that we saw in the data tab. And then you also see VF time, which is the array of the time ID values. So this is the actual data itself. And likewise, you'll see VF Y name, which is the name of the dependent variable, in this case, sales. And then VFY, which will contain the array of dependent variable values in the historical data, basically. If we go to line 15, this one is important because we need to convert the date, the SAS date, because the origin of that is different than what's in Python. So the origin date for SAS starts in January 1st, 1960, so that you need to specify to the Python code so everything works properly and that you're actually using the date values that are in the data. The rest of this, you'll see some optional values here that you can use to tie in, again, with what's in the VF project, and then they're used directly in the program. So let me exit this. Let me just make one point before I exit this. When you run the code, it is actually running, the code is converted and run behind the scenes utilizing the external language package that's part of Visual Forecasting. And that package has been around for a number of years now. So let's now take a look at some of the results. If I open the forecast viewer here, there's a number of capabilities here in the viewer. I'm just going to focus on the graphing of the data here. So I'm going to select a time series. By default, I come up with an envelope plot over all 17 of the series. So now I can see how the one series compares to the mean, and then within the bounds of the actual and predicted, I'm going to remove those so I get a better idea of what the time series is. The dots represent the actual values. The blue line to the left of this vertical horizon line corresponds to the fit over the historical region, and then to the right of that, the blue line is the forecast. And then around the forecast is this blue confidence interval. And I can switch from series to series and see how they look, and then I can also multi-select and share and view multiple series at one time, and I can turn off the confidence bands as well. So let me go to model comparison now, and let me look at the results. And in here, I see a summary of all 3 modeling strategies that I've used. The auto forecasting is denoted as the champion with a star. Here's the statistic that we are using. You can see that has the lowest weighted MAPE value. That's why it was chosen as champion. And then down here, you see some bar graphs with the summary statistics for each of the methods. So I have auto forecasting, profit, and exponential smoothing, along with some execution summary information about the series. Once you have the open source node integrated into the forecasting pipeline, I can now do anything else that I can do in visual forecasting. I can add an interactive modeling node to work with series at an individual level, and I can also go to overrides if I need to override any of the final forecasted values. And that would be based on whatever is designated as the champion. And that completes the demo. You can see how the distributed open source code node integrates into the visual forecasting pipeline and allows you to take advantage of all the features in visual forecasting.
Great demo. It's awesome to see how easy it is to use this in forecasting. But what's coming up next in the future of forecasting and this feature?
Well, there's a lot going on with forecasting and more generally analytics. It's difficult to keep up. I mean, I'll readily admit that. Read as many articles, blogs, journals, books, etc., whatever you can get your hands on. Like I said, there's a lot going on and there's new stuff coming out every day. I tend to focus on looking at the practitioner perspective and how to help them. There are more practitioner-oriented resources and conferences available now than there have been in the past. Practitioners provide a view into what users really need when they're doing their forecasting and what they need from the forecasting systems. We also still need original research, so we have to strike a balance between the two. But just some general thoughts on the future of forecasting. I think the first two items I'm going to mention are kind of standard and have always been there. The first one is start with a focus on the process of forecasting. And by that, I mean, the end-to-end process, forecasting process that results in improved efficiency, effectiveness, profitability, or competitiveness for the organization, because that's ultimately what you're trying to do by improving the forecast. If the forecasting process is bad, not even the most sophisticated analytics are going to help. And when you're doing this, don't be solely focused on forecast accuracy. The second item, which is always going to be around, is obtaining better quality data and the right data. And this is always going to be an issue. As far as what we can expect to see more in the future is in anything and everything around automation. So in the areas of feature engineering, monitoring, and forecast quality and model fitness, reports and recommendations, and that will probably be more provided via natural language generation. So you're actually interacting directly, it's speaking back to you. Some other things, another area is openness and accessibility. Openness and extensibility. This we kind of demonstrated with the distributed open source node. This is one example of opening up and making it extensible to include outside, in our case, open source stuff into a SAS product. We'll also see more use of machine learning and deep learning techniques and hybrid methods, which combine both machine learning, deep learning, and forecasting. This has been going on for a number of years now. Probably the last 4 or 5. It's gotten a lot more interest and a lot more hype around it, just because of the emphasis on machine learning and deep learning. The hybrid methods combine, combination of, like I said, machine learning with traditional techniques. The line between these has completely blurred. They were separate domains. And now they're, like I said, the line's basically gone. Everything is fair game. Interpretability and explainability of models is also becoming more important to the user. So it's nice that we give them a model, but they want to understand what's really driving the model. What variables are important? What's really driving the forecast? Is it just price, or are there other things involved? Another area is around better integration with model ops and model ops frameworks. And that's regardless of the specific type of modeling, whether it's a traditional time series model or more of a machine learning, deep learning model, or one of these hybrid models. And then everyone's aware of ChatGPT and the large language models. So these are going to play a role. And one of the things that we have to figure out, along with a lot of other people, is how they can be used with forecasting and fit into the forecasting process. So exciting times, lots of things going on.
Great. Sounds like there's a lot on the horizon and also a few issues to be aware of. Joe, one final question here for you. If I wanted to learn more about forecasting and the distributed open source node, where specifically would I go? You mentioned some blog articles, but is there anything else that I could dig into?
So the first place to start would be on the SAS.com/visual forecasting website. That'll give you the most information about, our visual forecasting product and the distributed open source node. There'll be links to the documentation from there. In addition, there was a webcast done about a year or so ago about best practices with modern forecasting. This goes into a little bit more detail about how to use some of the machine learning or hybrid nodes, and also around segmentation. So that's also some very helpful for someone who's looking to get just basic information about forecasting and some of the things that they can do in general and with the visual forecasting tool.
Great. Yeah, it's always good to get the best practices down pat as a starting point before diving deeper. Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Very cool stuff. Well, it's mid-August, only one more month to go before SAS Explore, SAS's in-person user and technology conference, September 11th through the 14th at the Aria Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. I'll be there recording interviews with our SAS rockstar programmers and more, but I also look forward to meeting all of you in person. This is SAS's first live user conference since 2019. There is no better way to connect with fellow SAS users than at SAS Explore. If you're a data scientist, developer, or an analyst, you will want to be at SAS Explore. There's going to be some big announcements from SAS R&D about new innovative tech we've been working on. I'm personally excited to get the latest on generative AI and analytics, data governance, open source, and intelligent decisioning. These are all topics that we've covered on previous shows, but now we'll get to hear about them firsthand. And if you use the code HOTELBUNDLE3DAY before Wednesday, August 16th, you can get a SAS Explore Pass and 3-night hotel bundle for just $16.95. Just use the link on screen and in the chat. At SAS Explore, you can level up your work game, get inspiration from the Innovation Hub, and then turn it up at the kickback party. So, register today. Now, if you're not using SAS Viya yet, we're now offering a new 14-day trial of SAS Viya through the Azure Marketplace. Here, you can access the full power of SAS Viya using your own data. After the trial, you'll only be charged a small hourly usage fee through our pay-as-you-go plan. And don't forget that we also have our standard 14-day trial as well. It's completely free, so you have nothing to lose. Well, we've reached the end of our show. However, we will be back at it again next month, Tuesday, September 15th, with Viya highlights and interviews from SAS Explore. If you're watching this on YouTube, why not give us a like, subscribe to the SAS Users YouTube channel, and click on that bell so you'll get notified for new videos and when we go live for our next show in September. Until then, comment on what topics you'd like to see in future shows. I've been your host, Tiago de Souza. Register for SAS Explore. Register for SAS Explore. Thanks for watching.